My name is Gina Duvernay, and I'm the Adult Services Manager for Gwinnett County Public Library. It's nice to see all of your faces. Some I've seen before and some I haven't, so you're welcome back anytime. I think I've told a few of you that we have some delectable treats in the back. We have red velvet cake. Oh, you have some. And some lemon cake and lemonade and all the good things. So please go ahead and get that. Otherwise, we'll just have to take it home tonight. So anyway, we also have Karis Books from Decatur in the house. So they're here. Hi. They're here to sell copies of the lovely book we're here to discuss tonight. So you're welcome to go ahead and purchase from them. And afterwards, there will be a book signing. Okay. So again, thank you for coming. I'm just going to go ahead and read the bios of our moderator for the evening and our author. So we'll start with our moderator, Kristen Causey. Wave. She's the manager of our Peachtree Corners branch. She has worked in public service for over 12 years, dedicating herself to making resources freely available to all members of the community who want to expand their education, career prospects, or to simply pursue their creative interests. Prior to her role in Peachtree Corners, Kristen worked in libraries in Mississippi and Iowa. Lara Love Hardin is the literary agent, author, and president of True Literary. Prior to founding True Literary, she was the co-CEO of Idea Architects. She has an MFA in creative writing and is a 5-time New York Times bestselling collaborative writer. 6-time. Whoa, it just keeps. And then tomorrow, we don't know what it'll be. Very good. Writing, including the #1 bestseller, Designing Your Life, and the 2018 Oprah's Book Club pick, The Sun Does Shine, which she co-authored with Anthony Ray Hinton about his 30 years as an innocent man on Alabama's death row. But we also must mention that this book obviously was the March 2004 Oprah Book Club pick as well. She lives in La Selva Beach, California, and she has 21 chickens. Do we still have 21 chickens?
21 chickens, 4 ducks, 5 dogs, 3 cats.
And she has adult sons who, well, sometimes live at home on the holidays and big laundry days. Let's give a round of applause to Lara.
Sorry, I just jumped into your intro there, but thank you. Oh.
Gonna need that.
Awesome.
Well, thank you for being here. We're very excited. Could you start out by telling us what your book's about and what inspired you to write it?
It's a fictional book. No, just kidding. So my book is, it's a memoir. So it is a select period of time in my life. And it is really my journey from soccer mom to opiate addict to convicted felon to getting out of jail and having to rebuild my life. And it's also about love of books, which were in the perfect place for this. I love libraries. And the power of writing. And it is about becoming more than the worst thing or the worst version of ourselves we've ever been.
I think that was one of the things I picked up on reading it, and one of the reasons it was so hard to put down. Gina had given me a copy to start, and I thought, well, I'll just read a little bit tonight and go to bed because I have to get up for work. And around 3 a.m., I was like, maybe I'll just finish it.
I mean, I didn't not design it that way, right? Because my measure of a good book as a reader, because I'm a reader also with fiction and nonfictions, I don't want to be able to put it down. So,
no, it was impossible.
So I did that. Yeah.
Good job.
Thanks.
You planned it
Or
well.
I tried, yeah.
It totally worked. One of the things that really caught me about this was the escape and reinventing yourself. The escape is addiction, and I love how compassionately you talk about it, because it's something that's so I doubt there's anyone in this room who hasn't dealt with addiction themselves or someone close to them. But the way you describe it as the escape instead of a personality flaw, if that makes sense. And it was the escape and the reinventing yourself. Like, you went from a college student to housewife to a business owner and mother, a literary agent, a writer, an addict, and a prison reform advocate, which is incredible. That's a lot. That's a lot of roles. And the forms of escape, like sex, food, money, books, and drugs, and everybody has their form of escape. Could you talk more about those?
Sure. I mean, the first, for those of you who haven't read the book, the first line of the book is reading was my first addiction. And really what I talk about, it was an escape. I had like many people, a fairly traumatic childhood and not a happy home life. And what I did is I kind of escaped into books and stories and other people's lives. And great coping strategy. As a child, didn't always serve you later, but really what and no one goes to jail for, reading too much in book club, but for that addiction. But really for me, it was a way to escape myself, and books are a healthy way, and there's lots of ways we all do it. So, I've totally went blank on your question. So for me, like the escape, the imagination, the reinvention was really just a function of going my whole life and not really knowing who I am. And, as a child, I was really good at assimilating into other people's families, right? Because that's how I got attention. That's how I got fed. That's how I got a family dinner. And there's, something I write about in the book, which is like the problem with being someone who can belong everywhere or fit in everywhere is you belong nowhere. And so really I just spent a good part of my life running from the addiction that plagued my family. And in this country, there's 48 million people struggling with addiction, and then all the people who love them. So triple, quadruple that number. So there is no getting away from it. Unfortunately, there's just a lot of shame and stigma around it, so we don't always talk about it, and we don't always hear like the good stories, the hopeful stories. Did that answer your question? All I
Yes.
remember. Okay, good.
Yes, it did. That was,
I'm a little jet lagged from California, so.
and that actually leads into the passage that it was one of those where I read it and just stopped and read it multiple times, and it kind of made me feel seen and really, really powerful to me. So I was wondering if you would read it.
Sure. What is it? I'm so excited to see.
It's right here, and I marked it off. We librarians like to mark
Starting
things
here, but you mark in pencil.
in pencil, in our own book.
I don't think I've ever, let me see what chapter this is. New Year, New You. Okay. I don't think I've ever known how I am or who I am. I have always felt like an actor playing the role of me. My whole life, I had pretended to be a beautiful, happy, shiny person. I fit in everywhere because people love beautiful, happy, shiny people. But the problem with me trying to fit in everywhere is that I've never actually felt like I belonged anywhere or with anyone. I couldn't reach out for help before the police came knocking on my door because I was so desperately playing the suburban mom role I'd created. This is how a real mom shows up to school board meetings. This is what a real mom makes for snacks. This is how a real mom should sacrifice herself for her children. Is it? Okay.
Yeah, I think there's so many people that feel like that, and I've never heard it put into words so eloquently. So that was incredibly moving for me, and thank you for reading it.
Thank
Everyone
you.
else.
I wish at that time that I could have had, like, I wish when I was reading that, it's all in italics, so I'm reading it, but I wish I had been able to write a sentence. This is how a real mom asks for help. Right? Because that's what I couldn't do.
It does. It feels like the way things are set up in most communities, people don't reach out until things bottom out because they can't. they're keeping up with the image of what they're supposed to be, like what you were talking about.
Yeah. You mean people don't reach out to you, or
Or
you
just
don't
reach out. They don't reach out for help because they're keeping up with, like you were, this is what a mom looks like.
Yeah.
This is what a mom does.
And this was 15 years ago, so there was a lot less open discussion about mental health issues or struggles. And I think that's something that's great now, right? Or addiction. There's still a lot of shame and stigma around it, but it's a little better. I think for me, it was just asking for help was just not in my vocabulary, right? Like I grew up pretty much my own from a really young age and was very proud of how independent and I have it together and very invested in, you thinking I have it all together, right? Not you particularly, you're just right there. Sorry. I didn't mean to call you out. And I was the kind of person where like this wall could be on, is this mic working for you guys? Okay. This wall could be like on fire behind me and like things crashing down and be like, no, everything's fine. It's just a little warm. I got it. Don't worry. Go on about your life, And with addiction too, I was so ashamed. Like no one grows up saying, I hope I can be addicted. I hope I can go to jail someday. Like that's not a thing for anyone in struggling with those issues, right? But at the time, what's so ironic, the one thing when I think back is there were people in my life if I was brave enough to be honest, right? And vulnerable, like that is the most radical thing you do is be vulnerable. If I had been that then, there are people who would have helped me. But in my mind, I was like, there's no way I can leave my children for 30 days to go to rehab. That would be impossible. Like not knowing what was in front of me, right?
Yeah, it makes sense.
It does and it doesn't. Yeah. Yeah.
Another part that stood out was the experience of jail, since I think that's a lot of things people haven't experienced and don't understand. The loss of self, despair, the hierarchy, the new rules that you follow, food, the makeup. I especially liked the part about the makeup, and finding in your account, the part I really liked was how you just sort of naturally slid into your role as a mother, even in that setting. So could you tell us more about your experience in jail?
Sure. Anyone here ever been on a PTA board? Okay, it's a little bit like that, right? Like the power struggles, or how many people in book club? How many book clubs have power struggles of who's running them? My personal one definitely does. So, I think in a like group dynamic, especially a group of women, there's always going to be those sort of like, what role do we play, right? And I like to be funny, but it was horrible, and I don't recommend it, so don't go for community, right? Like, but for me. But for me, it was the best thing that could have ever happened to me, because what happened is when I went to jail, every single piece of identity that I had constructed carefully around me to tell the world who I was taken away. I was not a mother in jail. I was not a wife. I wasn't an employee. I wasn't a boss. I wasn't a school board member, little league coach. I didn't even have a name. I had a number. And I was very much alone. And the community I had was not there. And there's a gift. For me, it was a gift to have to get really honest. As I said, someone who had been like trying to fit in my whole life, or be who I thought other people wanted me to be. So there was a gift. Now it's easier to see that gift like 15 years later looking in the rearview mirror, but because it was really hard. But looking back, it was a gift to be able to become the real me. Like I'm more me now than I've ever been me in my life, I think. And in terms of like the mom energy, You have to understand, and again, every jail and prison is different, and it's, its county system reflects that county and that population and that demographic. But my best friend in jail was 19 years old. My oldest son, when I went to jail, was 17 years old. So I had, there were a lot, I wasn't the oldest one in there, but like at my age, I was considered old, and I was new. Wasn't something I had like, I wasn't a tourist in jail a lot, going back and forth or anything. So it was a very strange power structure, but I learned it. And the women in jail were a community. They helped me, because as different as our life experiences might have been before that moment, or where we lived, or our education, or anything, in there we're all going through the same thing. And the truth is 80% of women in jail are mothers, often of minor children. That's in jails. In like prison over wide, it's about 60%. Often the sole caregivers of 2.5 children. And all, regardless of what they did to get there, desperately wanting to be with their children and do better. So we had a lot in common. And, for me, it was, I did get the best makeover I've ever gotten. Like, sorry to Oprah's team.
It was one of my favorite parts.
But with a woman who had a pack of colored pencils, all you have is a hot pot of water, and like them things that could be done with a hot pot of water, like amazing chefs. And she, put hot water in a cup and just colored pencils, $1.50, beautiful makeover. I mean, it was a low bar to get me looking better than I was at that time, I'll admit it. So might not be very low bar to improve from. But there was so much creativity. There were artists, and I talk about in the book, like women who can make, like IKEA level furniture out of Tampax boxes and toothpaste. Like people will make a family wherever they are. If we all get like trapped in here tonight, I'm not like gonna try to scare you, Gina, but like if something happened, well, Gina's definitely the shot caller, right? It's like we're all trapped in here. But people form a community, and you support each other when you're going through the same thing. And so that was a gift. And tell me if I'm talking too long, because I'll just keep going. One of the other great gifts for me was that I started writing again in jail. And I had stopped. I'd gotten a master's in creative writing. That's what I was good at. It's what I got attention for. It's what I did. Reading's a gateway drug to writing when you're at any time, at any age. But for me, that's what, all that reading I did as a kid turned into writing. That's what I did at school. That's what I did in college. That's what I did in graduate school. And then I had 3 children, 5 years, and like, who's got time to write? And that's really like, I like to say I was a very late bloomer to addiction, but also an overachiever, right? But those two things can't go together for me. Like Hemingway could, like all those people, Kelsey, like they can be high and drunk and write things and win awards. But for me, writing is how I made sense of my internal life. It's how I processed my own pain. It's how I made sense of the world. When I stopped doing that, that's when I picked up a opiate that was legitimately prescribed to me. Because back in the mid-90s, they were handed out in sample packs. Like anytime you were in a mood, the doctor's like, here, try this. And this is before the opiate crisis was a crisis, but how it became a crisis, honestly. And so that's how I started processing pain. And when I stopped that in jail, I started writing again. And so I started ghostwriting in jail. I wrote letters for the other women to get them like sentenced to long-term treatments at a prison, or a pass to get out for a funeral or a graduation. I broke up with a lot of people for them in writing. And I seduced a few for them because I was writing again. Right?
I love that. It sounds like
it was probably illegal when I think about it now. Like I'm writing the letters to the judges as other people when I'm in there for identity theft. And then I become a ghostwriter, so I don't know.
Another thing that was really a line you had in your book that really stuck with me was when you wrote, "In Cassandra's arms, I feel like I am good." And it was going over the difficulties in rejoining the community after jail because you just found that community and somewhere where you can be open, more open, and then you're back out into the community that caused a lot of the issues in the first place. So could you tell us more about?
I could give a 20-minute TED Talk on that right now, but I won't. But I think here's the thing. So Cassandra was running this program called the Gemma program, which was started by women in Santa Cruz County Jail. It's a program where women were like, how about we tell you what we need for programming, right? And at that time, this was again a long time ago, you got to leave, you got to put on some normal clothes from like a volunteer thing and go do these classes at this, I can't remember, maybe a Unitarian church or something nearby. And I love school, but I was like, really wanted to do this. And I was also in so much shame because I had been sentenced. And when I was sentenced, my face was on the front page of the paper, calling me the neighbor from hell. And all these online comments, someone anonymously printed them out and mailed them to me, and I read them over and over again, and I internalized all of that. And I already felt really, talk about like mom shame, and now there I am, like, I've done this whole thing and hurt people I cared about and lost everything, and my children, I had 2 boys in high school, 1 in junior high, and a 4-year-old, and their mom's on the front page of the paper. Like, parents are embarrassing enough to teenagers, right? And so I really wanted to do this, but in that moment, and Cassandra's like this beautiful, amazing, big spirit, kind-hearted woman, I was worried she didn't know how bad I was and that she was going to let me in and then regret it, so that was when I was like, but okay. And it took me, I would love to say I did that program and then I knew I wasn't bad. It took me 12 years post-jail because despite all the felonies, like I'm a rule follower, like at heart. And so like when I was in jail, I was like, okay, I have my sentence. I'm going to do everything that's asked of me. I'm going to be, I didn't get in any trouble in jail. I'm going to do all the things. And then when I get out, I'm going to do all the things of probation and then I'll be done. And then I can, be done. And I had no idea, like maybe I knew it intellectually, but it wasn't anything in my normal life I ever thought about, right? Because we know what we know from TV and movies. And honestly, when people think about incarcerated people, they don't ever think about women. They think about men. And women are the fastest growing population, 750% increase in the last couple decades. I don't know, I'm bad at statistics, go to my nonprofit. But so I thought I would be done and I had no idea like all of the ways that I would never be done, the ways I'm still not done right now. And all of the illogical obstacles we throw in people's way, like we say we want to rehabilitate. Here you have to do your sentence and do your time and do your probation. But here you go, here you're out in the world. Now make sure you're in 3 different places at once when you have no transportation and no childcare, or you go back to jail. Make sure you get a job, but you have to check a box or you go back to jail. Make sure you find a place to live, but who wants to rent to someone who went to jail? So then women especially get into like the underground rental market. And again, these are the sole caregivers. And so they're desperate to keep their family together. And that just puts you in a situation to be victimized or to revert to old coping skills because you're desperate, right? So there were all of these things that I didn't know. When I was in jail, I would, we'd have a big hot pot goodbye party. Someone would make a cake. I don't know how, but it was delicious, right? And the woman would leave full of all good intentions. I'm going to stay away from that guy, right? Because there's a lot of interpersonal reasons why women are mostly in jail. It's often interpersonal. And 100% have trauma or domestic violence or sexual assault of some kind too. It's a very traumatized population. And they're going to go back to school. They're not going to do drugs. They're going to do this. And a week later they would come back. And when I was in there, I'd be like, and I'm ashamed of this because I didn't know. I was like, how could they be so stupid? Like, I'm never coming back, right? I didn't know until I got out And I got out with all the privilege of having a master's degree and being a white woman who could walk into a job or whatever, not have that be the first thing someone thought about me. Like I could present a certain way, and that has a lot of privilege in it. And it was still almost impossible to not go back to jail for reasons that had nothing to do with committing a crime. It was bureaucracy. It was illogical. Like if you have kids, you do logical consequences, like on a timeout, like, oh, you did this, so you do this, so you learn this. This was like, no, you can't have a child care subsidy. What? Like what? You can't get that professional license. You can't homeschool. Like I wrote a book for 2 Stanford professors. It was a #1 New York Times bestseller. As them, I wrote it. But I wasn't allowed to homeschool my child, right? Like it's just illogical and terrifying. Like I still, 15 years later, still have dreams. Used to be like way more often. I would say maybe once a month now, that I'm going back to jail for reasons that are not my fault. Like as funny as I make it, I still have those dreams. And I'm like, no, I'm trying to explain. And that's what it was like every single day for years. You're just on this edge, and it's really isolating and really ridiculously hard to rebuild.
Yeah,
Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Yeah, you talked about going back to the same community, which had to be incredibly hard after, and even seeing some of the same people, and you mentioned the Gemma Project, which I know that you're a co-founder of now.
Yeah, so that original Gemma program kind of fell apart as things do over the years, and at one point, a couple years after jail, I went through the hiring process along with a lot of other candidates to work in that same Gemma program. And then at the last minute, I was still on probation. Probation said, they blocked it and said, like I had business cards. I was so hopeful and happy because I had been like fighting to rebuild. I was living in like a 400 square foot apartment. I'd got my son back. I hope I'm not spoiler alert, but I think a lot of people maybe have read it. But and so I got this job, and I was like, this is it. This is what it's like. You're like, this is the thing. This is the move forward. This is the hopeful thing. And then probation, the head of probation, who happened to be the wife of the DA at the time. If you read the book, you're going to know who I'm talking about. So we can't have someone on probation supervising women on probation. And so I didn't get the job, and I was just devastated, and it was always like that. So about a month before the book launched, because both nonfiction books, you write a proposal, you sell it, you have a year to write it, and then a year before it comes out. So the whole time after I wrote it in that second year, I was working on creating a new nonprofit that's gender and trauma responsive services for incarcerated and formerly incarcerated women, right? Because women respond to it, they need it. And so I called it the Gemma Project, and I did it with Cynthia Chase, who's the former mayor of Santa Cruz, where I lived, and has been a corrections officer. She's a social worker, so we worked on this for a year. And there's like, I don't mean to be petty, but they wouldn't hire me, but now I own the Gemma Project, so like, but it's a little petty. But the thing is, I will tell you, 2 weeks ago, Oprah and I went into the largest women's prison in the country, which is in California. And we did book club with 150 women. They've allowed the book in, and our program is going in there. And those women all want the resources and the support and need and deserve it to rebuild. Like who doesn't deserve a second chance, right? Or a third or fourth or fifth or all the chances. Because what are we saying if we say, nope, no more chances? You're not person anymore. I got to work with Archbishop Desmond Tutu over the years, and I ghostwrote a book called The Book of Forgiving. And he said to me, he's like, I will never call, no matter what someone has done, I will never call them a monster. Like, it doesn't matter what they've done. And I was like, really? Because someone did something to my children. I didn't have that same, but he's very spiritual. But he said, no, because the minute you call someone a monster or something like that, you take away their humanity. You dehumanize them, therefore you're taking away their potential to change. And I was like, oh. And we do that, like, it doesn't have to be monster that we do that. It could be words like addict, felon, criminal, loser, like whatever the things, you know? So again, I don't know what I'm talking about.
No, that's perfect. That was that was amazing. Because reading about the Gemma project was amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, we're creating a model that hopefully can be replicated across the country. I'm working really hard on it.
Yeah, it was a rabbit hole. I started looking at it, and then it was just amazing. So it was hard to stop reading like all of the statistics and everything you're up against with it.
Yeah, and it's different for women. Like the number one predictor for women to for recidivism for women, which is going back to jail, is poverty. It's not committing a crime. It's not addiction. It's poverty, right? And so if you already have a little bit of a wage gap, and then as an incarcerated person across the board, you are going to make 67% more, and then it just goes on and on and on. And it's hard. I get it, because I mean, I could tell you, if we had hours, like I could give you 10 reasons why hiring a formerly incarcerated woman, all skill levels being the same, is a good idea and better for your business, right? And it's really hard if people won't give you a job. How do you ever? And poverty is a number one predictor. So that's like the first thing. But one, like you want someone who already knows crime doesn't pay, right? Who's not but also like I have found that people who want to feel valuable again, because when you're in that system, in the carceral system that was built by men and run by men, and you have a lot of traumatized women who are being controlled by those men, and you feel like you have no value or worth to the outside world, and someone gives you a chance to prove yourself valuable. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. I found that people will always rise to the level in which you believe them. Same with like who are so grateful to have a house, a legitimate, safe house to live in. They will pay their rent early. Now, not everyone, like all things being the same, but our thinking is all things being the same, I should give to the person who doesn't have that. But you don't know that everybody's got secrets. This is what we've learned, right? Everybody's got secrets. And so, yeah, I don't. Okay.
Thank you. Could you tell us more about finding the strength to write this book so honestly, which you knew you'd be judged while you were writing it, and you knew how hard it was, but you wrote it, and I think it was so important that you did.
Yeah. So I mean, first of all, I always wanted to write a book because that was my thing. I did. And I spent 12 years writing books as other people. I got a job at a literary agency. I started collaborating on books and kind of hiding in the acknowledgments sections, right? And I was so good at Jason. I'm working with Brian Stevenson, and I'm working with the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu and Stanford professors and all these people doing good things in the world. And it was like, here's the best way to describe it. And I was keeping a secret. I was keeping my past a secret. I was living in fear people would Google me. But the thing with secrets for me, it's like imagine two trains. It'd be great if that train went by right now with this analogy I'm making up on the spot. So there's this train that's the truth, right? And the truth always comes out. And I'm keeping a secret, and that train's going. And I know, like, it's going to come out. And then there's the train of goodness I'm trying to drive, right? Like, when those trains crash together, I want to have a resume of goodness. Look, I worked on Nelson Mandela's last book. He thanked me too. Oh yeah, I know I'm the neighbor from hell, but like I was building a resume and being so good adjacent, because in my mind then, I was going to have to defend my goodness and my value in the world. I don't feel that way now, but that's how it was. And I was in so much shame and those trains are going to crash together eventually. So what I did is I crashed to myself. And so I got up and I did a little local TEDx, and I told the thing that I was most afraid people would find out about me for over 11 years. I've been keeping the secret, and shame is so heavy and sticky. And I was like, here's here's this, and here's who else I am. And the feeling I got after doing that felt better than any drug I've ever taken, because I felt a lightness. People didn't run screaming. They applauded, which I love, yeah, but they came closer, right? And shame is, like, the more you stay isolated, it keeps you away, because I'll be your friend. I'll go like to dinner with you, but I'm not going to really tell you about you if I'm keeping a secret and I'm afraid you're going to find out something. And that feeling it felt so good, that lightness, that I didn't realize like how much I'd been carrying and how sticky it was. And so then I decided to do the book, because it's a crazy story. So as a literary agent, like, it's a crazy story. And I thought I could help people, but I was like, okay, but I'm only going to do it if I'm being really honest. And when you can kind of like razzle dazzle with those 26 letters, I could have written a book that was, some of you might have thought was honest. Some of you would have seen through it. Our shot caller might have seen through it over here. But so I was like, I'm going to only do if I'm going to be really honest. There's things in the book that I never told anyone, that actually weren't even in the proposal. My editor and my agent, because even though I'm an agent, I needed an agent, had seen. My children certainly didn't know. So I had to let them read the book before it was too late. But again, like, just getting it all out there, there's so much freedom in not having to worry what people are going to find out, right? And it frees up so much more of creativity and presence in life for me. So I did it because I thought it would help, and it's a crazy story, and I've always wanted Oprah to pick a book I wrote.
And now too.
As a kid, I didn't know it'd be this story, right?
And I'm sure you get asked this a lot, but what are you working on next?
My next TED Talk, no. So I am, right now I'm working on a bonus chapter for this book that will go in the paperback, which is due in a month. Simon Schuster's, because there's a lot of story arcs that have changed, because a memoir is, it ends and then life tends to go on and things tend to happen. So I'm working on that in the short term, like it's due in 3 weeks. So I have to start that and do that. But I'm also working on 2 novels at once, because I've written 14 nonfiction books, 13 is other people, 1 is me. My background is in fiction writing. That's actually what I think I'm good at. So we'll see. So I'm working on a novel, because people love fiction. I love fiction. I'm working on a screenplay for The Sun Does Shine book. And if anyone's read that book and know Mr. Anthony Ray Hinton, today is his birthday. So I was just on the phone with him right before I parked here. And that's an amazing book. So get his book. So I'm working on that, and I have my own agency, so I'm helping other authors. I'm selling their book proposals, and my son Cody just got married, and I have another son getting married in August. So I'm staying busy.
It sounds so busy.
Oh, and the nonprofit. I forgot.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah. My house is a mess. So
My house is a mess, and I don't have half that going on. So. I didn't feel.
I mean, I always have to have like some big thing. Like, I always have some big crazy things. Like, my kind of plan to take over Hollywood next. Like, I don't know. Like, they're trying to make this into a TV series. And I have the option to be in the writer's room if that happens. So I might try television. Like, I don't know. It's not that I'm young, but have a lot I still want to do, which kind of keeps you younger, I think.
Well, that's exciting.
Perfect place to give her a round of
Okay.
You don't have any questions?
I do. Who was your first? Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me. Who is the first person to give you an opportunity after jail for employment?
Let's see. First was Gemma, that program I did, which under a grant to help women who are incarcerated, I managed that grant to help women who are formerly incarcerated with minor children get jobs in the community. And I was so good at advocating for other people, not for myself. That's always was harder for me. And then I wrote travel blogs online for this a company called Content Divas. So I started writing again, which was ironic because I was on probation. I couldn't leave the county, but I was like, in Hawaii, we do that, like I was like traveling all over the world in my imagination. It was great vlogs. But really, I answered a Craigslist ad to work at a literary agency. And it was like, we work with Desmond Tutu. I was like, he's probably a serial killer who's advertising on Craigslist with these, it wasn't. So it was a man named Doug Abrams who became my agent. And I started working for him. And I worked for him for over 12 years and we're still really good friends. He lives 10 miles away and started my own agency. But yeah, but he really, when he hired me, he didn't ask about my past. I had a don't ask, don't tell. If he asked me, I was going to be honest. It was like 2 years post jail, but he didn't ask. So luckily I had the chance I started editing. And I mean, he hired me for a part-time assistant at $20 an hour, 5 hours a week. That was the job. And I thought this was the answer to my things. When I left 12 years later, I was CEO. But I started writing and ghostwriting and editing and working. And so luckily I had a few weeks to prove myself. And I worked around the clock because I was desperate to prove myself and do something valuable, like I said. And it was 3 weeks later that he Googled me and found out. And he really had to make this choice. He said, this is something I believe in theoretically. Do I walk my talk? And I had to say, I'm just as smart. He had called me brilliant like the day before. And I was like, I am still that, even though I'm this, and so it was a choice for him. Like it was really hard. And it was hard to go back after he Googled me. I was like, okay, that's it. I'm going to never go back there. But luckily he gave me the opportunity and it worked out for both of us.
I have kind of a personal question. I guess I haven't quite finished reading, so you may touch on this later in the book. But how hard was it rebuilding that relationship with your kids, or was it?
Okay, well, I'm gonna say I'm really 1,000% biased when I say this. My kids are amazing. No. But my oldest son Dylan, he's my most sort of like analytical thinker, I guess. Like he's a data scientist now, so of course. But he said to me, and he always tells me I got the quote wrong in the book. He said, "Mom," what he said to me was, "Forgiveness is automatic, but trust is going to take time for him." And so it wasn't. I had they had a good, solid, like, they felt loved always, even though I was struggling, even though I was like, chaotic. It was, the chaotic part before I went to jail was 11 months long. And so they had a foundation of feeling really loved by both their parents. And we had we had a wonderful relationship before and we had one after. It was hard for me because I didn't have, like 3 teenagers are gonna be like, yeah, Mom, we don't care. We'll sleep on your floor of your 400 square foot apartment, And Caden was 4 when I was arrested, 5 when I got him back, and has been with me ever since. And the other boy, Dylan went off to college right when I got out. And then the other 2 were in high school. So we're all very, very close. Dylan just bought a house 10 minutes away and is getting married. They never didn't love me. They just wanted me to be okay. And they were never angry at me. They were worried about me. And really it was just the constant day after day, week after week, month after month, showing up and doing exactly what I said I was going to do every single time with them. Right? That's all they needed to know I was okay. Yeah. And they're amazing. Like they'll all graduate college. Caden's a freshman at UCSD. He's finishing up in a few weeks. They're in like healthy relationships. They've never gotten in trouble. Like, I don't know, it's going to skip a generation, so maybe their kids are screwed, but no mom wants to be her kid's like college essay topic, if you know what I mean, right? And I'm, the thing I regret is that my way of learning things the hard way, or what I had to do to become who I am, that there's collateral damage, that I am their like resilience story too, and their traumatic story, and that I had to hurt people I loved and cared about, especially my children, but like people in my community and neighbors. So that is the thing, you know, if I could learn my lessons without, even the hard way, but just without the collateral damage, but that's really hard to do. I'm like, I know you guys do. Yeah.
I think one of the most impactful parts to me in the book was talking about the difference between the consequences that you suffered when you accepted that deal in the justice system and how that was so different from the male that was involved in your life, right, at the time. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that and then just how that affected your relationships moving forward with such problems.
So the male in question was my husband at the time and Caden's dad, who became my co-defendant. We were charged as co-defendants, same exact charges, same exact requirements. Here's the thing, women are judged much more harshly in the criminal justice system. Never once as a judge up on a bench say to a male defendant, who's taking care of your children? Like how, you know, like it just doesn't happen. So we had to pay the same exact restitution. I, you know, again, like a jail Girl Scout, followed all the rules. He did not. He got out, he got in more trouble, he got remanded, he didn't, you know, it took like 5 years for him to get clean, but somehow probation let him off of probation years before me, made him not accountable to pay back. They expunged his record and he, you know, just went off. I am 15 years later, just now trying to expunge my record. And so my public, this is going on right now. So this is very like, I have my, these attorneys and they're like, we need you to write a 3-page letter. We need you to get 10 letters of support. He didn't have to do any of this. It was just automatic and they gave him money, right? I paid back all the restitution, which took me, you know, forever. And, you know, I'm a little more advocate-y for myself now. So I emailed the attorneys. I was like, how about we have a hearing and the judge tells me why they should not in the interest of justice? Because in the interest of justice, they did already for the same exact thing. And she's like, don't write that in your letter. And I was like, okay. You know, but so I don't know, like now there's going to be a hearing. I got all the letters, you know, and it was really triggering because I'm like having to prove that again. I was like, do I have to like cure cancer? Do I have to invent interstellar travel? Like what more? He didn't have to prove he was doing any good. So it's still going on, but like really, you know, no matter how it turns out, it's going in that bonus chapter. So they, you know, see, hopefully they behave. But it really is hard because I'm actually in the process of selling my house. It's going on the market soon. And I'm going to have to rent for Kate and I. I am 15 years later, 6 New York Times bestsellers. Like, here's my picture with Oprah and the Dalai Lama, terrified that I'm not going to be able to rent a house right now. Not for financial reasons. It's terrifying. And that's because I still have that record. That's why I want to do it. It's not like I need to do it to get a job. I might, you know, life happens, who knows? But there's boards that want justice impacted women to serve on them, to advise them, but I can't serve on them because I'm a justice impacted woman. Like it, you know, it's still illogical. Like it's still so illogical. So, yeah, so I'm working on that now. We'll see how it goes. You know, hopefully within the month I'll know either way. And then, but I do have a friend who's like, should we just go straight to the governor for a pardon in California? I was like, maybe, I don't know.
If you do decide to move forward with your story as a television series, would you try to incorporate formerly incarcerated women into the characters being portrayed?
Yeah, so I know this is being recorded, so I don't know if I can give this away, but so the idea with the producers who optioned it and the showrunner, they're actually going to start it on the day that I get out of jail. It's going to be a lot of reentry stuff. It'll do flashbacks to like pre-life in jail, because obviously, you know, we all saw Orange is the New Black, so it's not bad. So it will have those characters I was with at Blaine. And also the production is hopefully, if I have my way, going to hire a formerly incarcerated woman on every aspect of the set, even if it's for training. That is my goal for that also. Yeah. Yeah.
Question. When you set out to write the book initially, when you decided, okay, I'm ready to tell my story, which part of the story did you feel most compelled to share? Like there's so much in this book, right? There's so much. So what was it that you initially wanted to share with the world?
That's a really good question. You know, and it's hard for me to separate what I want to do, which is like, this is what I do. This is my lane as a living. So like, you want to start in the action. Like, I know, like, you know, and memoir is, unlike autobiography, which is like, I was born and then this, how, you know, it's really like you have to pick the scenes that best illustrate the themes and threads you're trying to do, or they illustrate the opposite. I won't go into writing class, but it's like, so for me, I really wanted nobody else to waste so much time in shame like I did. I think that was one. Two, I wanted to really, you know, here's the great thing about memoir. When you're reading this, when you're reading any memoir, Anthony Ray Hinton's memoir, any memoir, you are that person, right? Like in the I voice, especially in the present tense, which is why I did it, like you're making all my bad decisions with me, right? You're right there. It is you when you're reading it. And to me, memoir is the best way to hack empathy for issues in the world, right? Because the amount of people you might think I am 100% for the death penalty or not, but when you read Anthony Ray Hinton telling his story as him, it doesn't matter whether you're like for or against the death penalty. Nobody that I know of is for an innocent man being put to death, right? So it's just this way to kind of like open hearts a little bit. You know, one book's not going to change anything, but I think like people don't think about incarcerated women, right? And if we do, we have a lot of judgment. I certainly did. So it was all of those things, and just this idea that like I created a whole identity out of this worst things ever said about me and the worst version of me. And I judged myself and I didn't forgive myself. And so really I wanted people to do that and do it a whole lot sooner than I did, right? Yeah.
Is part of your Gemini project, is this book now is there a hope of like this being your gift as people, like is there a goal of this book being like something that's given to women as they're leaving?
I mean, the book's not like promoting the book is not part of the Gemma project. I will tell you that Simon Schuster donated like 700 books into the women's prison, and the warden there at Chowchilla, which is the biggest women's, you know, in California, the warden there allowed hardback books, because normally you can't have a book in there until it's paperback. And she's allowed it in. She's requiring every correctional officer to do it. We're not requiring that. And I'm going back in July to do book club with 2,000 more women, right? And what it's giving them is just hope. You know, like the conversations we're having, like sometimes it's just as simple as like, how do you imagine something else possible, right? Like we've been talking about that a lot in that setting. You know, whether people read the book or not, but it's certainly the reason I launched a nonprofit when I did is I was like, okay, for a while I'm gonna have a big microphone, so I want to do some good with it. So that was the strategy.
Along the lines of your book, and like I've read Just Mercy Bryant's book and Anthony's is on my list, what other memoirs or books that talk in relation to yours would you recommend for someone who wants to know?
I mean, I'm a literary agent, so I'm very biased about what I might tell you because I'm going to hype my authors. I mean, the thing is, all the books I work on, but both at our, you know, Idea Architects when I was there, when we're building that, and my agency now, like, and this is not to sound earnest, but like they're all because it's a lot of work and it's a lot of time and it's a long process. And so it's like, you know, our mission statement, IDRX, is with books that would create a wiser, healthier, or more just world. Now, like, I could spin a big umbrella under that and be like, the keto diet makes us a more just world, like, or whatever, but it's really like stories and big ideas and perception shifters. Like, I have an author, Mark Daly, again, totally biased, who wrote a book called Safe. It's a memoir. And he is the opposite side of my story. He and his husband were trying to foster adopt some children whose parents were incarcerated. So it's coming from the opposite side of what I was working with. And it's a beautiful, beautiful book and story, because you can't talk about incarcerated women and not talk about foster care, right? Because those women, 80% of who are mothers, you get, depending on the age of your child, the CPS court in the same county will say you have a year to get your child back and meet all these requirements, most of which you can't do in jail. And then the judge in the same county in the courtroom next door says you're sentenced to 18 months. And then we wonder why there's 400,000 kids in foster care. So that one, if you care, but those are issues, you know, I mean, they're good books too. I don't just do issue books. Like, it has to be a good story. It's like sneaking cauliflower as mashed potatoes, right? You're going to think it's mashed potatoes, but it's really cauliflower, and it'll do some good. But you'll enjoy the mashed potatoes. That's my analogy. And then there's this woman, Sylvia Vasquez Lofato, who has, again, another memoir. I don't just work on memoir, but it's called In the Shadow of the Mountain. And she's the first Peruvian woman to summit Mount Everest. And she's got a really powerful story. And Selena Gomez may be playing her in that thing. So I don't know. It just depends what you're interested in. But I love ordinary people with extraordinary stories. Right. I mean, there's like a lot of great celebrity memoirs. There's a lot of powerful memoirs. But, you know, if I like to read fiction when I read for pleasure, I read all day, every day for work. I like fiction, and then I like memoir, and like real people, so I can learn what's going on in their lives. Like, that's, you know, I'm super nosy. I would want to be in everyone's business. Was there another question back there?
I don't really have a question. I just wanted an enormous face that had microneedling. It's
So jealous.
so like I cannot believe who did it, and I'm coming here. But anyways, I just wanted to thank you for writing this book. I am a product of two addicts, and I had a rough childhood, and this book took me back to a lot of what I went through. But I had a mother who, I just want to say kudos to you, because my mom didn't care enough about me to want to change, and she died an addict, and I was blamed for a lot of it, and my father has disowned me, you know, like still at my age, and I've always been made to feel like it's my fault, and so this was kind of like healing for me, I guess, a little bit, because it's like some of the things you said about like you know, you're finally feeling like who you really are. And, you know, although I had a rough childhood, I've got three, you know, wonderful children, and I was able to leave in like I'm 52. And so I just graduated with my master's, and I teach kindergarten. So I have a really happy life, but I've realized when I was reading this book, how I still have so much, and I'm an open book. Like, I'll tell everybody everything about me and what I went through, and sometimes I have to be stopped. It's like, you know, not everyone wants to hear all the yuck, but I just really appreciated how you wrote the book and how you were honest, and I really just like felt like your kids are so lucky, you know, because you fought for them. I'm like you. My husband was like, what in the world? Like, they have never seen me read so much since I've gotten out of school, but I'm like, I couldn't put it down. And I think for me, I needed to see a happy, how things turned out for you. And although I'm sure it was not easy, and 15 years later, you're still, you know, struggling, but I just wanted to tell you from somebody who has two parents that didn't care enough, you know, to want me in their lives. But it's amazing to see what you went through and fought, and you let them always know how much you care about them. So I just wanted to, it's not a question, but I just wanted to tell you I'm thankful that the sheets did not, you fall asleep.
Yeah.
That did not happen because you were able to read this book and you touched people's lives that, although I don't have addiction, but it has been part of my life, but it was really touched me and I realized that, even addicts can still love their kids. So.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm sorry about your mom. I think that was hard. It's hard for people to reconcile, and I tried to write. It's hard to even have language to describe what it's like to be in the compulsion of addiction, what it's like to know right from wrong and know this is not who you are and not be able to stop, to love your children and want to be there for them and that not be enough. Like that both things can be true, and it's hard to reconcile as a parent. It's hard to reconcile for people who don't have experience. It's hard to reconcile as the children. Look, someone asked me if there's one line I would change in my book, and it's in the beginning, because it was kind of where I was then, when I was writing the first draft, and I was talking about my childhood and going to other families, and I said, everybody's parents loved me except my own. And I regret writing that now because I had that same thing, like, what's wrong with me? Or like, they don't, and I think I can't have compassion for myself, more compassion for myself as a mother now, and self-forgiveness, and understand the choices I was making with the abilities I had to make those choices, and not have that same thing for my mom. She loved me the best she could, given, trauma is generational, like it just goes on. And I will tell you, like, when I've been surprised, I'm going to say two things and tell me if I'm talking too much, but I think one of the reasons why I was so honest too, because I think like the generations of trauma in families, in my family, like they always need someone like you're doing to stop, turn around, face it, and then we're good, right? And it's really hard to do. And I've been super surprised at how many children with mothers specifically, and not children, adult women whose mothers don't have the same story, who've reached out, or their parents, because it was an audience I was really thinking about, like it just, who said that they got maybe a little more compassion for the situation or empathy, or just a little bit. And sometimes we need that little bit when it's so heavy. And when I moved Caden into college at UC San Diego in September, the end of September, and like I worked so hard, like I was never gonna let anyone tell me I was not my children's mother. I couldn't imagine that. And someone's like, how are you so resilient? I was like, I don't know how I did it, but I know why I did it. And for me, things got bad enough, but they had to get really bad, had to get, like, I don't know what below rock bottom is, but that's where I was, and it's not like, oh, and then it was great. It's like this with addiction, with like overcoming. And so I've worked so hard for so many years, like even with like I'm meditating with the Dalai Lama or New York Times bestsellers. I was never like, oh, look how great I am. I was just like, what's next? It was just like this grind and this hustle and this sort of trying to prove and trying to build, that when I moved Caden into college and my older boys were helping move in the dorm and I was by myself for a minute, parking the car, and it's a beautiful campus. And I was like, that was the first moment where I was like, I was proud of him, but I was like, I am so proud of me. That was the moment, still getting it, where I was like, this could have gone so differently for both of us. That was the moment I thought of that. And statistically, he's more likely to go to prison than UCSD with a 4.0 GPA, but that was the first moment where I let myself be proud of myself. Now I'm like, oh, I'll be proud I sat there tonight. Look, my boots match my thing, kind of, I'll be proud of anything, but just where I was, like, that was the moment, and I think you don't have to have gone to jail or be addicted or be super ashamed of something, but like those moments, especially as women and mothers, I don't think there's any men in here except for, but like it's hard sometimes to stop and just be proud of ourselves, And in addiction too, like sometimes you're proud of yourself, like, okay, for this minute, I didn't, or this thing. I went through some really hard things in the beginning of January before Oprah popped up on a Zoom, and like my dad died on January 1st. And my husband manifested his dream woman who was not me, surprise, right? Like all these things started happening. And I'm so honest now, sorry if it's too much. But I was like, wow, not once did I think of doing drugs. And I've been through death and divorce and all the things. And sometimes even when really good things happen, that's even harder to cope. Sometimes you're like, I'm used to the other shoe dropping. What's going to happen? And I was like, wow, what's different? And I didn't go through them alone. I have this community and I have zero look good. And I let people that is the thing I want people to get to. Like I never had people I could be really honest with and messy with. And like now I'll be messy. I don't have that same you're only going to like me if, sorry, I'm not even talking to you. I've been looking, but you're only going to like me if I present a certain way, and that's a gift, that community. And for women too, we live longer if we have women friends. Doesn't mean you have to tell random strangers at the supermarket all of your trauma, but to have people that you can be radically honest with, that is super rebellious. And so that's what I try to have in my life. And so I've been through hard things before, but I always went through them alone. I always internalized. This time I did not, and that makes it so much easier. And probably a lot of you learned that at a young age, but I'm learning it now. And yeah, that's a gift. So thanks. And congrats on the degree.
I think that's a perfect way to end it. Thank you so much. Oh. Somebody's lucky night tonight. Get a pick.
And now I'm gonna feel bad whoever I don't pick.
That's a lot of people.
Okay. What are they winning?
I don't know. Right. Let me see.
Is it Jonna Jazz? Jane Jazz?
Jenna?
Jenna?
Yeah, Jenna.
Jenna?
Jenna? Oh, are we picking somebody else?
Jane?
No, Jonna.
Jonna.
Donna? No. Okay. Go.
Just spiking the bowl and leaving? What's happening? We're gonna read her book someday. Okay, now we have Dee Dee Davis.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And I'll just tell them that we are, thank you all for coming. Please take some red velvet cake and some lemon cake and just over to Claire's Books and copies of the books that Laura will be signing over here. Okay, thank you so much for coming.